Good morning to our listeners here on Long Island. It's a pleasure to welcome you to another episode of Suffolk Matters, where Suffolk County meets Suffolk AME. So my guest this morning is Ben Tremonte. He's unit president of the AME Police Civilian Unit. Ben, welcome to the show this morning.
Thank you, Dan. Nice to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about what that means. So the Police Civilian Unit, why don't you tell us a little bit about what that is and what goes on in that division of the police department?
Sure. All right. So within the police department, as you know, cops can't do everything. Their main focus is being on patrol. And so we employ roughly 400 civilian employees in the police department to carry out functions on a daily basis. Everything from your clerical situations on up to technical situations. We have many different positions in our different specialized command bureaus. For instance, aviation, Marine Bureau. We have mechanics. We have evidence tow recovery operators. Of course, IT people, right. Budget people. So it's very varying as, is our membership in general.
Of course. Yeah, and, within the police department, in addition to that, you've got the police emergency unit, people who take and dispatch, take calls and dispatch police officers to emergency situations. And you also have the crossing guard unit. So when you add that all in, inside of the police department, there are close to 1,000 people working there that aren't sworn officers, aren't, the brass over there or like detectives or anything else. And those functions are essential support. The AME members' functions are essential support to what those officers do.
Yes, they absolutely are, Dan. You're correct 100% on that. The three different units combined, do a lot of behind-the-scenes work that I think sometimes the public doesn't realize. It's difficult, when we're doing this work, and you want that recognition to it. Sure. You want your people to be recognized that they're helping keep the streets and everything safe in our county. If I could walk you through, you mentioned Caitlin's, unit, the police emergency unit. Yeah. And some of the calls they take in become very intense, some leading to very bad situations.
Right.
Where their job function, stops, kind of my people step in next.
Right.
If there's the unfortunate situation of a murder scene, let's say.
Right.
You're going to have civilian personnel going out with the detectives to, process those scenes, right. Collect evidence, whatever it takes. If for some reason a Marine Bureau boat is needed or an aviation unit is needed to go out, our guys back there are the ones who make those things, go across the water and fly.
Right.
So it all kind of flows together,
right.
And I know you had Scott Mirabella on from the ME's office before he retired, and that's kind of like the next phase of the work, because then a lot of that goes over to, that unit, the medical examiner's unit. So
and all of that all goes hand in hand with, successfully prosecuting when a crime is committed. There's a chain of command, chain of custody, with all of the evidence that comes in, all the reports that are filed. Everything's got to be stored and retrievable, and everything has to be demonstrated in a court of law to have been handled professionally and properly throughout the process.
Yes, absolutely correct, Dan. Again, right from the, clerical, person working in the precincts or wherever, on up, it requires that kind of diligence to make sure that when the DA's office gets the case, everything has been done properly. Right. And our people, our members, play a big role in that, in helping the investigators get to that point. Yeah. As well as, the clerical staffs in the precincts, they're helping the cops on the street, on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
And, when you're in the unfortunate situation of being in an automobile accident and you need that police report, it takes several steps to get where it needs to go so that you can retrieve it for your insurance purposes or what have you.
Right.
So again, it's just kind of a big working circle of our membership.
Yes.
From one unit to the next.
Yeah, and just to touch on something that probably won't be readily apparent to our listeners, there's always talk in the paper about the sworn officers are compensated at such and such rate, and so it's always in everybody's mind that that's the job, that's the job to have, and our members are essential services in support of those officers who have a very serious, risk-intensive job. And we support not just those officers, but the public in being able to achieve justice ultimately in the end at a compensation rate that is grossly different. And I guess I'm using a double entendre there with the word gross. Average pay for an AME member is take-home salary is roughly around $45,000. So a lot of what your unit does, they're doing because they believe in the community, they believe in the system, and they know that they can watch over the processes necessary to get, from a bad occurrence all the way down to justice being served. They can carry the ball across the finish line, so to speak, and they're doing it not because they're being so well compensated. They're doing it because they believe it's the right thing to do, and they're the ones to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are, some of the jobs are the types of jobs that people, studied for, went to school for, and, wanted to get into that, forensics, whatever it may be.
Right.
And, it's an absolute great opportunity. But there are inequities in the pay scale, as you mentioned. I can give you, factual, where you have an office where you have detectives and civilians working together, doing the same exact job.
Yes. Well, the easy example, Ben, from my standpoint, is if a crossing guard is unable to cover a post for whatever reason, they got a medical situation, they're homesick, an officer comes in and does that same job. And the difference in pay there is greater than 5 times.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's something that we don't want to see happen. Hopefully the numbers of crossing guards are up to the levels that they should be. And I'll say for my purposes in my unit, we had a really bad stretch of time there where we were down in numbers.
Yeah.
And we couldn't perform a lot of the functions that, the public may walk into your Central Records Bureau at headquarters and want something, a FOIL request, for instance.
Right.
We just didn't have the personnel. We could take the order, but, fulfilling it in a timely manner was very difficult. Luckily, we have been able to get our numbers back up to where we need them to be, and we were talking, you had opened up one of the questions earlier. Working in the police department, I've always been proud to be there.
Yeah.
I'm almost 26 years there.
Yeah.
And, when I would say that, that's where I work, automatically people think, oh,
Look
no,
at Mr. Moneybags.
that's not the
Right.
that's not the case. And, I would take time to explain to them, what we do there as a workforce, the civilians, and, that our functions are just as important. And, it serves a vital, service to the community, obviously. So.
Yeah, and so having civilians in the police department, there's a lot of training, there's a lot of rules that are in place. Everything has to be done just right. But the cost, and I think that's what the public contract is here, the cost of putting sworn officers in positions to, keep records in order in a filing cabinet versus having a civilian who doesn't have to go out in a patrol car or respond to some of these, it may be a domestic dispute at a house where you don't know what's going to happen, what could transpire, or whatever else. Right. But it's still essential support. And I think the cost of the public would be too great to go the other direction.
Right.
But I also believe that there is room to right some of the inequities over there. The fact that new hires come in get trained in the functions of the Suffolk County Police Department, and after their training is complete, go to other municipalities, because those other municipalities will pay them enough so that their kids can eat.
Right.
You don't want these essential services inside the police department performed by people that can qualify for benefits the county government offers to people who don't earn enough and can't get by. That's, I think, a very dangerous situation.
Yeah. And we did have that situation at one time where we trained people at a very high cost. And, we did lose them to another agency because of the pay scale. I have one title in particular. It's a police detention attendant title. And, the work that these people perform is, once the officer is done with a prisoner, these are the people who now take over the prisoner and are charged with, watching this person, ensure their safety while they're in custody,
Right.
transporting them off to arraignment the next day or
Right.
wherever they need to be. And it's one of the positions that we've been seeing part-time hirings in, which,
Right.
it's we know we don't have much control over that, but it's a dangerous position to have that.
Very much so.
Because and there's a turnover,
Right.
So it's one of those things where
If I could just touch on that real quick, Ben, you're not just talking about, and of course, sometimes is, I don't know, a bar fight or, altercation, somewhere where someone has to be brought in, but also think of front page news. Some of the worst things that happen in Suffolk County, that still flows through, your hands and the hands of all the people working at the police department in AME, and they would be set up with these detention attendants who could potentially be part-time, and that really is a little concerning. I mean, if you're on shift, you know all the people, you know all the players, you know what to do in a situation. If you're kind of breezing in and breezing out, that's probably adding to the danger.
there's an absolute, and because I do talk to my detention attendants.
Yeah.
There's absolutely a different mentality from the person who's been there for 15, 20 years or so as a detention attendant to the person who's walking in at only a part-time rate, not getting even the benefits that the veteran person is getting.
Sure.
Now, what's their incentive to really go, 100%?
Can't be their only job either.
No,
So where
course
is their
not.
focus? If they're doing this, as I guess a side gig,
Even my full-time detention attendants have to work side gigs to make it work.
that is very unfortunate, Ben. And again, that just brings us, full circle back to, maybe that public perception of, working in the police department and what your compensation is.
Right.
Some people are compensated very differently than others. I understand the reasons why. There's different risks with different jobs, but the need for so many AME employees that are essential to the running of government to have a second job, to have secondary income, or to apply for benefits, which we've seen. AME
Yes.
members applying for benefits the county government provides. So it's an AME member sitting down with an AME member saying, I can't make enough money to keep the heat on, and I need this government to help me. Rather than raising their rate of pay, they have to apply for government assistance.
Yeah.
That's not good. And, I don't believe that the public really wants it that way and believes that it should be that way. I think the perception or the cognitive dissonance here is that people think everyone's earning at a different rate than they really are. Again, across all of AME, 32 departments, you're looking at the average salary at around take-home pay, $45,000 a year.
Right.
That can't be a primary salary, your only source of income in Suffolk County. It's not even living wage in any of the legislative districts in Suffolk County. None of them is that a living wage in.
Right.
So this is an ongoing problem, and it is all of these services that people rely on day in, day out to get the job done. That's why I say, our membership is altruistic by nature. First and foremost, they're not taking the job for the money. They're actually taking the job because they want to help the community, and they wish they could do better for themselves. We just have to. It's incumbent on us to get them better compensation rates, to get them better job protections. It's the function of this union.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Dan. And, you and your executive board have been doing that. You've been pushing that for us as a membership, and on my part, what I try and do on a daily basis is educate my members, make them aware how important it is for us to be involved with our politicians, state, local, whatever it be,
right,
wherever we need to push to get, what we need done.
right.
And, it's unfortunate that, like you said, some of our members have to work double jobs, they're depending on services, whatever it is. And it leaves them little time for anything else, really, after you figure in their family responsibilities and all. But, I do see a change where people are starting to pay attention. Our members are starting to pay more attention. They're starting to realize, that some of the way to get things done is to, kind of raise your voice a little bit, together.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
make it known how you feel.
And that's, that brings us right to political action. I feel it's very important for our association to know what our issues are, what our members face, and to get that message to the people who write the rules and the people who, I guess, sit at the top of enforcing those rules and set policy. And that's why I think it's also very important to make sure that when we put our name behind a candidate, that we know that candidate is going to take the time to listen. They're not going to agree with everything we say all the time. I mean, right out of the gate, there are some inequities that we've talked about on this show that desperately need to be addressed. But how do we get to a yes on that? That's not something that you can just flip a light switch and all of a sudden it's fixed. But we can take incremental steps to get there, and taking those steps involve us with the political arena, so to speak, everyone that works in that system, not just the elected representatives, but all their support system as well, to try and make common sense changes that don't do harm, but do help benefit and right some of these inequities.
Sure.
And, to that end, I mean, you've been involved with AME on various political items, and coming up not too long from now, AME is going to head up to Albany with a nice force of our membership, and we're going to break into little groups, and we're going to go speak to different representatives. Obviously, our local representatives in both the Senate and the Assembly, we need some time with, but we're also going to branch off this year and talk to some key committee chairs about specific legislation. We're going to know exactly what the bill is and exactly what our support or opposition is to help inform them making their decisions. Right. And I think it really says a lot to Albany. Right. When we show up in force. Recently, Joe DiStefano, an AME member, member of the fire department, was elected to the Assembly. And for his inauguration, AME put, I guess Newsday put the numbers at like 60 to 70 people at his inauguration. We were the largest group by far, so much so that they actually had to adjust the day they were doing his inauguration on to make the accommodation for us being there. I think Albany thought the expression of we're bringing up a busload was, like just an expression. Yeah, I'm going to bring a busload of people. We brought a busload of people. And it was noticed. It was reported on, and it was talked about in the halls after the fact. Who is this guy, and why are people driving all the way up from the tip of Long Island to Albany to cheer him on, taking his oath and starting his career? But that matters. And when we go up for our lobby day, it's noticed, and people listen to what we have to say. And we have a responsibility also not to ask for something unreasonable. Right. But when we have reasonable asks, we have follow-up on that also. We show up in force, we ask, and then we've got someone every single week. Stan Human, our legislative director, who is following up every single week, popping into offices. Hey, this is going on. What's going on here? Where do you stand on this issue? We really need you to be aware of these details. I don't know if it's being spoken about. I mean, that's his primary function, and does a phenomenal job. But why don't you just speak? I rambled again. I apologize. Why don't you speak a little bit to, as someone who's been on these trips to Albany,
Sure.
just let us know a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, for many years now, I've been going on that yearly trip to Albany when the weather is an agreement for us.
Yeah.
And they have an impact. When you have that many people showing up from one group, from one organization, I think your voice is being heard. We were a little non-existent there for a while.
Right.
You and, again, your executive board have brought us back into the mix up there in a big way.
Sure.
So much that I hear it a lot from, of course, working with the other unions in our department, the police unions. People have been taking notice, and our voice is back once again in Albany. I look forward to that trip every year. It's very satisfying. Yeah. Joe DiStefano, we can't say enough about.
Right.
To have been able to put one of our own, in place up there is a big, victory for us.
Yeah.
It's showing our push, in the political direction that we want to be in that arena. And we're there, I think. You and your board and the, people that you've brought along to help us have been doing a tremendous job getting us,
Well, it takes a village,
Yeah.
I can't even try to accept that compliment without folding in the board of directors and the delegates, because all of that group combined is the governance and decision makers in terms of what we do and why. But everybody seems to get it. They seem to understand what we're doing and why. And it's always good to report back and say, and I can't say it today, but soon you will hear some bigger news with respect to, things that we've set in motion, and had to have set in motion years ago, bearing fruit, And again, when we talk about all of this, just for the listening audience, what we're really trying to achieve here, because some of this could just probably sound nefarious, and it really isn't. What we're trying to do is fix that inequity to get a workforce that's averaging take-home pay around $45,000 and bringing them up to the point where they can afford to also go to the movies, where they don't need assistance from the government they work for to get by, to pay their bills, to keep the heat on. Right. And that's the greater purpose in all of these things that we're doing and everything, and Ben, again, thank you for the compliment, but it really, it takes a village, and I think everybody in AME is aligned towards this goal, to making sure, we knew we were behind, and we were behind a lot, but if we don't start walking down that path, we're never going to get there.
Right. And I think we're all holding each other accountable more these days.
Yes.
And if you go back to a couple of major obstacles that were put in front of us as a union, many unions, with the Constitutional Convention issue, that was big, and
84% voted no.
And then
that
the
was
Janus
the labor union,
what you and your team did with putting us out there and getting protections for us with the Janus was just it was the talk of the town.
Yeah,
it really was, and so.
I gotta speak to that real quick, 'cause I talked to some other lobbying groups, and I'll see little pieces of legislation that they were involved in, and a lot of times, they're peripheral players, so to speak. You know, someone comes along and they say, like, I strongly oppose this, that, and the other thing, and in the background they go, me too, and they kind of just follow along behind. With the Janus decision, that wasn't the case at all. We weren't going to sit back and wait to see what happens. The directive was given, unfortunately, by me, so if it went wrong, I would have been in trouble. But luckily it went well. I said, let's work on this now. I don't care what else anybody else has. We'll take the best of everything and fold it together for the best possible thing, but there's got to be something in play, and we've got to be contributing to that, because we don't know what everyone else's interests are. We know what our interests are, so let's get something together. And at the end of the day, 11th hour, the only bill in play was the one that we were working on. Everybody else kind of had a let's wait and see kind of attitude. And I gotta give a shout out to a lot of organizations with regards to this Janus stuff. When it became apparent that this is what was in play, everybody focused, honed in, and got that thing refined right down to where we are today. And nothing's ever perfect, so we're gonna have to revisit this as time goes on and make necessary adjustments. But I've never been one to say, let's see what everyone else does and we'll adjust accordingly. Let's forge our own path. Let's figure out where we need to be, and we'll make adjustments along the way. But inaction is inaction, right? And I don't like that action. I like.
Oh, and I think that kind of leadership is something that our members, they notice, they see, they respect, and become more involved of because of that. So
yeah. Well, it's all. I mean, everything you do for your members. I mean, you're doing it for them. It's never been about you. Joe DiStefano is another great example. Joe didn't do for him. Joe did so much for other people all the time that it was a foregone conclusion that he was right for the job of assembly. Yeah. He was not one of those guys that stepped over everyone else to advance himself and then landed himself a political appointment of some sort. He was a guy who put everyone else ahead of him, so much so that when you have to make the decision, hey, who's going to fight for me? What about the guy that's been fighting for me for the past 20, 30 years? Right?
Dan, I have very personal reasons for being involved with my union.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful every day that I have my job and the benefits that my union have negotiated over the years for us.
Right.
So that's my reason. And I always want to make people aware of that when they become a little complacent and think that we're not doing something.
Right.
You just have to, once in a while remind them, say, this is what negotiations, what comes from negotiations are your benefits, all the nice little things that you're getting.
Right.
So that's my reason for being involved. And I truly do. It's an honor to represent my people that I do, because I have some really, really great members.
And they're lucky to have you, Ben. I mean, we get feedback from all the different units, and your unit loves you. And I know you do a lot for your group. I've been to a few. I think one of the worst speeches I've ever given in my life was at an event. You were having an annual award.
Oh yeah, longevity ceremony.
And I got to tell you, when I'm off, I'm off. And that was that day.
You were good. That is something that we really take pride in. Myself and my executive board. We do that every year during the Police Memorial Week, and it's a great ceremony because we recognize all of our members' longevity, starting at the 20-year level. We just had a 50-year member.
50 years.
Yeah, this last year.
Yeah.
And what's really special about it, Dan, is that the commissioner's command staff all comes out and supports the civilian workers. You've been there, you saw it. It's a great ceremony. And a real big shout out to Commissioner Geraldine Hart and her command staff, because they truly appreciate the civilian staff at the department and are supportive of us and very open door with us. And so I really appreciate that with them.
Yeah. And again, I guess you just touched on something that I think not everybody understands all the time. You've got a lot of great people in government, AME members, but you've got people like the commissioner, the police commissioner, Geraldine Hart. She is bright and capable and caring, and she follows through on what she says she's going to do. Sometimes there are contentious relationships between the employees and the people they work for, and you're fortunate to have a relationship there that is more a partnership than it is, a contentious or a competitive.
Which it has been in the past with some other administration, and that's just normal. But you're absolutely right about her and her command staff. They're very approachable, very open-minded, and receptive to issues that we have. So.
And that makes me hopeful in all the things that we're trying to do to kind of right these inequities, to know that we have certain people that we can form partnerships with, to find common sense solutions that work for the people in the department performing the jobs, work for the managers who have to oversee all of that, and work for the public in a way that is, cost effective and gets the most out of, the public trust that's placed in public employees. So, Ben, I want to thank you again for being with me this morning, and to our listeners, thank you as well, and we will see you next week.